Let's calculate some absolute change. Now I want to start off by saying absolute change is a value, but it's a value that you use to talk about things. You don't just talk about, well, the absolute change is, that doesn't tell you anything, okay? This is just a way to find value and then to use that appropriately. So with absolute change, we find this by taking the new value and subtracting the reference value. Now, I often talk about this as new minus old. Some people call this final minus initial. I don't care how you think about it. We also oftentimes will talk about this as an absolute value because we're talking about a change. Whether it's 5 more or 5 less, it's still 5. And so that's where the absolute value comes in. So I'll kind of talk about this both ways so that you can understand what we're talking about. So I will often just put N minus O, new minus old, to give me a visual, or F minus I, final minus initial. Same thing. Okay, so the U.S. population was 298 million in 2006 and 323 million in 2016. Calculate and interpret the absolute change. The key word here is interpret. If you don't know what these values mean, they're pointless. It is just absolutely pointless to have a value if you don't know what it means. So let's look at this. Now, when you have years, oftentimes we'd say, well, the most recent year would be considered new, and the oldest year would be old. So absolute change is new minus old. So 2016 is new, so that value is 323 million, and the value in 2006 is old at 298 million. So my absolute change is 25 million. But what does that mean? Okay, so the interpretation of this means the U.S., because what are we talking about? We're talking about the U.S. population, and what about that population? Increased. How do I know it increased? Because my absolute change was positive, right? The numbers went up. So the U.S. population increased 25 million from 2006 to 2016. Notice that nowhere in my interpretation do I use the words absolute change, because that just tells me the value that I'm finding. It represents the 25 million. So when I put 25 million into my sentence, that's where I'm talking about it. Very important to note that. Number 1, Juliet's weight went from 180 pounds to 162 pounds from May to December. Find and interpret the absolute change. Once again, we need to recognize, right, what is new and what's old. Again, I'm talking about time. Well, December is the most recent month. We're talking the same year. So the December is going to talk about the new value, May will be old. Okay, oftentimes you can also say from. Well, from means old. It's where you started. It's the initial. To implies the new. This is where you went. I went from home to the grocery. Home was initial, grocery was the final. So from and to are also good statements to let you know old and new. So I could take 162 minus 180, and my absolute change here is negative 18. Now, I often would say the absolute change here is just 18. This negative just tells you this is a decrease of 18. So some people want you to say it's negative 18, some will just say 18, but the idea, right, we're here to focus on the interpretation. So the interpretation tells us, what are we talking about? Juliet's weight. So Juliet's weight decreased 18 pounds from May to December. The decrease of 18 pounds, that's what goes into my sentence. What am I talking about? What is my time frame? And the absolute change goes in. Next, the median income in the U.S. was $57,230 in 2015 and $67,520 in 2020. Find and interpret the absolute change. Dealing with times here. So most recent is new. Oops, I used the word new twice. And 2015 would be old. So absolute change is new minus old. Take 67,520 minus 57,230, and I get an absolute change of 10,290. It's positive. What does that mean? It means I have an increase. Okay, so increase of 10,290. Interpret. What are we talking about? We are talking about the median income in the U.S. Now, what happened to it? It increased $10,290 from 2015 to 2020. So there's your basic idea. What are you talking about? What happened? And then your time period. What are we talking about? What happened to that? What is the time period? If you put those three pieces together, you have yourself a good interpretation. And our last one here, John is 6'2" and Miguel's 5'9". Compare Miguel to John by finding and interpreting the absolute change with John as the reference. So remember that reference means old. So we're going to take, if we say new minus old, that means we're taking Miguel minus John. Okay, so Miguel is 5'9", subtract John, that's 6'2". Now, if you struggle with like feet and inches together, then change them, right? We know there's 12 inches in a foot. So 5 times 12 is 60 plus 9 means Miguel is 69 inches. And then 6 times 12 is 72 plus 2 is 74. So we would say minus 5. Now, again, that minus just means a decrease of 5. What does that mean? Well, whoever is new is what we're talking about. So Miguel is 5 inches shorter than John. You'll notice I didn't say a decrease of 5 in my statement because that doesn't make sense. We didn't take John, cut off 5 inches of his legs, and then call him Miguel. That's not what this means. It means if we're doing the comparison, because it's a decrease of 5, that means it's shorter, it's smaller, whatever. In this case, it's shorter because we're talking about height. Again, don't let your common sense leave you. Wait, so now we go to letter B, find and interpret the absolute change with Miguel as the reference. So now Miguel is old. This is comparing John to Miguel. Okay, so the absolute change. So now we would take 6'2" minus 5'9", or 74 minus 69, which gives me 5 inches. So did you get the same parts, or the same value in parts A and B? Technically, yes, because the difference is 5. You might say, well, no, because one is taller and one is shorter. True, so you could say no because one is an increase and one is a decrease, or taller versus shorter. But the idea of absolute change is what is the difference between the two values? That is the idea. Difference is 5. So because the difference is 5, yes, we got the same values. The difference between the heights is 5, no matter how you look at it. And that is the idea of absolute change.